All right, good morning everyone and welcome back to the continuation of the council meeting recommencing at 11:30 this morning. This is the council meeting that started on Monday the 26th of May 2025. In terms of health and safety, if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the nearest emergency exit. The assembly point is further down Devonport Road towards the Strand. Please be aware that this morning's meeting is being live streamed and the video will be publicly available on YouTube. Members, could you please speak clearly into your microphones, and if you want to speak, if you can just push your microphone button and you'll be in the queue. Please turn off your mobile phones. I just note we've got Councillor Schuler is coming in online. We have an apology from Councillor Morris. He may join us for parts of this meeting online. I just ask I'm happy to move to accept Councillor Morris's, and Councillor Kurak will second that. Thank you. All those in favour of accepting the apologies? Those against? That is carried. Thank you very much. I'd just like to hand over to Councillor Rolleston if he could give us an opening karakia. Thank you.
Mōrena tātou, kia noi tātou. Tui ronga, tui raro, tui roto, tui waho, tui te here tangata, karongo te ao, karongo te pō, nau mai te ihi, te we, te mana, te tapu, pau ki roto ki a mātou mō tēnei ata, koi a rā e rongo whakiriraki ki runga, turu whakamaua ki a tīna. Haumi e hui e.
Thank you very much for that. We just call if there's any declarations of conflicts of interest for today. No, thank you. As we go, if you become aware of a conflict, please let me know and we can deal with it at that moment. I note there is one late item to accept. That's 11.13. This is further issues and options paper included on the supplementary late agenda. This report was circulated to councillors last night and just the reason for this being late is it came up and obviously took time to prepare, but there is a number of further issues that we can look at in that to see how we wish to deal with that. Therefore, I'll ask a recommendation that the late item 11.13, further issues and options papers, be considered as a late item for the inclusion in the agenda and considered at the meeting. The reason they were late is that the information was not available at the time the agenda was published. Again, if I could have a mover, Councillor Kurak, thank you. Have we got a seconder? Councillor Schuler, thank you. All those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Thank you very much. So this morning we're going to start with local waters done well, and this is the deliberations. We've got a number of presenters and I welcome Stephen Burton, Catherine Sharplin. Who else we got here? We've got Paul Davidson who will present. Do you want to do an introduction? Is that you, Stephen? Or Paul?
I'll just do a brief introduction. So good morning, Mayor and Councillors. So the Local Waters Done Well Deliberations paper is really focusing on a number of elements. First being bringing back the feedback from the community through the consultation process. All of that information is included in the report, so we'll take that as read. It also seeks confirmation on the 3 waters versus 2 waters and recommends a 3 waters integrated approach for waters moving forward, and then recognises that further financial modelling is being undertaken, which will come back to Council and through a workshop in June with a decision on the preferred model prior to the water services delivery plan, which will be adopted in September. So that's a high-level introduction of what's being covered, and if anyone's got anything to add, or we'll take questions.
All right, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have a few questions from elected members. Who wants to kick us off this morning? Councillor Crowther.
The 2 waters versus 3 waters. Can you clarify the scenario? So if we end up with, say, a CCO with 4 partners, the 2 silent partners and the other one, so the thinking from at least 2 of those parties is 2 waters, it seems. So what Christina said before is that it's easier to set it up for 3 waters and then retract and go back to 2 if we kind of change our mind. The advice that other councils have got around New Zealand has, based on my sample, which is not foolproof because there might be others saying the opposite, but all the ones that I've got, the staff advice and consultant advice, is that it's kind of easier the other way, that it's easier to actually retain that and do a shared services agreement from the council to the waters entity to take care of all the pipes and the other bits and pieces that you guys in the waters, looking at you, Steve, we can kind of manage. And I get your point that you want to manage those things and you're keen to get them into a CCO and all that. But if for any reason we didn't want that, it seems quite a clumsy way from the outside, looking at it from where I am and seeing the advice that others have got, it seems kind of clumsy to transfer it all across and then do the shared services inverse, whatever that is. And I'm not sure what that is. It's basically control of the land and the reserves and road reserves and everything somehow goes back to TCC through shared services agreements, or can you just really open that out and unpack it for us, please?
Thanks, Councillor, for the question. It is complex for several other councils to decide what's the best way forward for them. We're in a position where we know our stormwater assets really well, and the interfaces between all the other activities of council are well understood. So we have a clear plan on how we could move the assets that would go into that CCO and what would be retained by council, mainly land assets and around stormwater. But I think other councils certainly staff have said to us, it makes sense to go into a 3 waters CCO, understanding that you will have expertise that can deal with it, and certainly there are a bunch of other benefits that we've mentioned in the paper as well around capital spend and shared expertise and so on. But the options of the others are they could either put it into the CCO, their asset, as well as obviously delivery of service, or choose not to, or they could get the CCO to manage the assets for them. And so there will be various options depending on the size of the organisation that wants to use the CCO or not. And I'd imagine that some of the smaller rural councils, they don't have many of the assets that we do, and they might think, well, we'll see how it goes. But I certainly at a staff level, we've found that once they know what we do in this asset space for stormwater, they show a lot of interest in it.
Yes, and just endorsing what Steve said, and in the report it does state reserves and areas of land that have amenity value would not transfer. And so, just as you said, there would be arrangements where there was matters of a stormwater nature that we would have with the CCO. So it's not all going across from that stormwater activity to the CCO.
Yeah, I guess I just want it to be a bit unpacked a bit more, because at a very practical level, I'm still unclear of, because when I read that, I sort of think, oh, you're talking about the 2.5 waters, but then I look at the other part of the report and I say, no, they're definitely on the 3 waters, not 2 or not 2.5. And I'm really struggling to understand how those two statements work together. So for instance, if you take an example like Carmichael Reserve, presumably that's going to stay in the council ownership based on that one comment. It's going to be serviced somehow without a services agreement, because we've already transferred anything to do with stormwater across to the CCO. So I'm thinking the water's physically there, sort of on the land that's our land, but I know from recent experience that there are waters people go into that reserve and they have their own way of doing things, and it's a side issue, but then there's the other part of council that does certain things in that reserve and does it their way. And I'm really struggling to know, like, at what point do we say this is waters? Like, is it just the ponds there? Is that waters? Is it that there's a particular time frame? Is it like, can you just really be very explicit about that, please?
Yes, it is. So it's quite as you say, at a practical level, there's a lot of issues to deal with. They were already being dealt with internally in the organisation, because you've got transportation people, you've got reserves people, you've got stormwater people, there's several people doing it. And that conversation has been going on for a while already about how would we, have the assets on the books of a CCO, the hard assets, the pipes, the inlets, and all of that, and the green assets that would be with the reserves team, and what happens in what situation. So service level agreements or relationship agreements are part of working through it and getting it in play. Stormwater is often an events-driven activity, and the man who handles the events has just walked up to the table, which is very handy. But being an events-driven, and again, that's, on a bad day in the stormwater space, there's definitely a need to be working with the professionals who are dealing with stormwater and wastewater, because those two systems, do interact in big events. But to answer your specific question, yes, there would be several service level agreements. I'll hand over to Wally for further comment.
Thank you for that. At the detail level, we've got a GIS layer that shows all the delineations between property that stays with council, property that may transfer. For instance, a treatment plant is completely ring-fenced, and that's likely that parcel of land, and also the parcels with the pumping stations, will probably go to the CCO, probably. The other land around it stays with council. When it comes to stormwater reserves, the stormwater reserve stays with council. The piped assets and the water, the wet surface, if you like, will be managed by the CCO. So we've gone through all of this. There's a GIS layer that outlines all of these things for us. If you want, we can bring it to you and show it to you. So we do have that level of thinking already, and we've got a very clear delineation of which assets stay, which may transfer. I'm not saying they will, but may transfer. And if that's managed through a service level agreement, or if it's a full transfer, that's something that we can work on. But we have identified those assets specifically.
Just to be explicit, because there are many people in this community who have asked this question, what is the difference between that and what Christine said in a public workshop meeting last year, which gave exactly the same description in my recollection, and that was described as the 2 waters or 2.5 waters model. I'm trying to understand what has shifted from when we were saying we wanted an option for 2 waters or 2.5, which sounds like everything that you've just said sounds exactly like that. And I'm trying to tease out, what is it that I'm missing? What is now making that a 3 waters model? given that a whole lot of assets you've just said remain in council ownership, like all the ponds down at Carmichael Reserve, all the parks that are flooded, they're all going to be council. So isn't that 2.5?
So the 2.5, the only time I've heard that referred to actually was in the financial modelling. So that was just saying of the whole range of debt and assets, it's probably less than the than the whole amount of stormwater, Three Waters debt and assets that you normally think of. It'll be something less, and we just had a brief headline that said 2.5 for that analysis. I haven't heard anyone else express it like that. It's very much a kind of financial carve-up sort of thing, but it's exactly the same as what's being talked about. Some assets will go, and the debt with those would go, and some assets will retain, and the debt with those would be retained. It's just an exercise of division of those assets.
So I think that's yeah, thank you, very, very clear, I think, to me, in the fact that it is really it's not really a 3, it's a 2.5, and a lot of that makes sense to me. Like we don't want to get into the situation where, where we have a waters team in-house that's dealing with stormwater and a waters team in the CCO that does everything else. So I'm dead against that, because you lose a lot of those efficiencies. I guess it's the devil's in the detail around how do we split those, and I think your comment, Wally, makes a lot of sense to me. For example, a pumping station that has no value to the council from an amenity perspective, so that should be, it should be in the CCO. The pipes absolutely should be in the CCO because they're looked after. I guess it's just that, where is that line? Because roads, we've heard, roads are used, for example, to to just as overland flow paths and to distribute stormwater. So that doesn't seem possible to send that to a CCO yet. The CCO needs to be managing the water side of that. So, and the inlets and etc. So, yeah, how is how is that practically kind of dealt with? Yeah, well, yeah.
Thank you. That's dealt with already. So presently, the leads and the inlets are the responsibility of the road controlling authority. So cleaning those sumps and grates and the lead coming from that is the responsibility of the road controlling authority. Once it gets into the stormwater pipe, it's the responsibility of the water entity, or at the moment, we're all one entity, aren't we?
Yeah.
But we still have those delineations in the way the services are provided. So there's no change.
Okay. So that's basically what the waters do now. The waters continue to do what.
I think from the financial perspective, it would be based on that primary asset purpose, effectively, where the asset would go, and that operational model would support that.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
And how does that again practically work? Because you can't charge a volumetric charge for stormwater at the moment. You have no idea where that comes from. So is a CCO able to rate effectively for stormwater?
Yeah, my understanding, and Stephen will correct me if I'm wrong, is for a period of time they can, but that will change over time because the ability to rate on a land basis is removed over time. Over 5 years, I think, is it? So
then what is that? So is that then that the council would be rating for stormwater and then handing the revenue over to the CCO? Is that?
That's how I understand it. So, yeah.
And how would that be split? If for example, we've talked to Carmichael Reserve, so that's dealing with a lot of the stormwater. So if we're rating for that, do we split it between the maintenance for the park and the water, or do we take all that revenue, or how we?
Wally's probably the right person to answer, but certainly the cost of running stormwater and managing all the existing stormwater assets, the maintenance contract that we have for response, and the interfaces between where the maintenance contract for transportation or for reserves, that work is is kind of measured and understood already, so we know those delineations and we know what that cost is. It falls behind the stormwater activity fence and is dealt with. So those would need to be reviewed as we go down. And you know, assets do change, they age, overland flow paths change, you know, infill development, there's all that. So the interface conversations will be ongoing.
Okay. No, that's good. Have we got, Councillor Taylor?
Sorry, just expanding on that a little bit, probably a question for you, Wally. Is there anything that you would see that's contentious about which way we'd take it, or is it reasonably clear cut, do you think, now?
Thank you. Well, from my perspective, it's pretty clear cut. We've got those clear delineations with transport. We also have them with spaces and places. We've transferred all of, about 3 years ago, even before City Ops was here, we transferred over all the maintenance of our stormwater reserves and green assets. And not just the green assets, the walkways, the signage, the seats that are in the stormwater reserve, all of that is maintained by City Ops. So we get the rates are collected and we pay them a contracted fee to maintain all of those assets. So those delineations, if you like, that you're concerned about or there may be concerns about are already catered for. And we did that knowingly a few years ago, anticipating these changes in local government and CCOs.
Sorry, supplementary. Our neighbours and prospective partners, do you think they're as well organised as this?
Well, our prime conversation has been with the Western Bay, and even during the Three Water Reform chapter, what we've been developing, they've been doing a similar exercise with the layer, the GIS layer, trying to identify. Obviously, they've got Te Puke, Karakia that are more urban, and then they've got other areas that are rural. So they've got a different array of assets, but they're doing it as well to get that delineation sorted out. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we're probably a bit more prepared, but I'd say they're very close. Yeah.
From a
And
CCO,
just remember, we have the same maintenance contract. We put up a single maintenance contract between the two councils, so across the waters, we are conformed.
just on further on that, does it matter if we go into a CCO with Three Waters and Western Bay come in with 2, and our other partners come in with some with 3, some with 2? Like, does it?
Yeah.
I would think, provided it will be ring fenced, that would be no issue. The issue would become if it wasn't. Yeah.
So potentially, like if we went to harmonisation, you might leave 3 waters behind ring fenced. Oh, sorry, 1 water behind and ring fenced. Yeah. So this is obviously a pretty stormwater is very complex. I guess compared to wastewater and fresh water, very easy in the fact that there's pipes. It's how much is going in, kind of how much is coming out. It's very clear that the land's owned, but this is parks, this is reserves. So what are the does it work as well as the 2 waters? So it's 2 waters with a maintenance contract to look after all those. And I guess where that's going is from a when we're doing consenting, when we're doing new developments, because does this make it easier or harder, because now they're having to work with the council and a CCO potentially if there's a 3 water CCO?
Thanks. I think if all the 3 waters are together, it will be easier. If they're separated, it would be more difficult, because there are implications across the waters. So having the 3 together would make planning functions more readily available. You have a modelling team that can do both. There's those kind of efficiencies that are built in. So I'll leave it at that.
If I'm going for a resource consent, because that obviously you need to have a stormwater solution. So am I just lodging that with a council and then they're going to the CCO, or how does that work?
Probably. They would also have to come for a wastewater connection. So a development needs a stormwater connection, a wastewater connection and a drinking water connection. And we just need to make sure that they're all lined up and that the runoff of water from that site is considered as well.
I think,
And
and that upfront stuff needs to go through the local authority, because you don't want a utility making calls that are contrary to what the plan maker is trying to achieve for the city. So again, it's about the service level agreement you have. There are people that will process the connections at the same time, and it will probably be, can council do that on contract to the utility? They know the requirements and they implement them in that. The other thing is just something about stormwater. The consent for discharge to the environment has to be managed quite comprehensively, and the CCO would be tasked to do that. It'd be, and often it's to do with discharges that are dry weather discharges that come into a stormwater system and have to be managed as an event, and of course the tracking of those contaminants and stuff are the responsibility of the CCO. So there's quite a few key responsibilities in that mix.
Okay, Councillor Crowther.
I've got a related question to what you were just talking about. That I've sort of, having spoken to some governance and staff at other councils, I'm still a bit stuck on what the difference is between, like, that, if you like, the view that I've heard has consistently been, if you have a service agreement that is a good quality service agreement, and you could, in this case, talking about, say, stormwater, that at a management and staff operational level, there's no difference at all in terms of the operations, the legality, the obligations, than if it was, and I'm not arguing, I've got no dog in the race, but I'm just saying, hypothetically, if it was, instead of 3 waters as you've called it, or 2.5 as I think Mahe and I are talking about it, instead of doing that, if you had it as 2 waters and a service level agreement that was comprehensive, which could be something which could come into play if there was harmonisation, and in my view, when there's harmonisation, otherwise why bother doing the whole CCO business. So what's your response to that? Like, where these other people are saying it doesn't make any difference, you're just employed to do work on waters, it doesn't matter whether 2 of those 3 are actually owned by the CCO and the 3rd one is just through a service level agreement. As far as you're concerned as staff, you have to just do the work because there's a legal obligation to do it. Can you perhaps tell me why that's wrong, if it is wrong, or whether fundamentally that is a correct view?
I think it's tried to be outlined in the report in paragraph 17, where it talks about the 4 points as to why I was suggesting the 3 waters there, which is around the avoiding of duplication of knowledge, the coordination of responses, the scale and efficiency, and the ability to actually have more borrowing capacity under the 3 water model versus the 2 water model. So they're the additional points effectively.
So I understand, like, the last point, and without getting into all the detail, I guess that's the reason I read that, and I'm just saying I'm not arguing for or against either option. I'm not suggesting that there wouldn't be a difference in the borrowing, etc. What I'm saying is, from a staff operational point of view, is there any difference in terms of your operational matters, or from the council's or CCO's legal obligations, if the 3rd water, stormwater, was actually arranged through a service agreement or whatever legal variation of that? I'm not aware of all the details around the legality of it, but whatever agreement there is between the CCO and the council, could you, at an operational level, have any difference at all compared to if it was we handed over assets fully in the CCO?
I don't know if I'm understanding the question correctly, but certainly in the City Waters team in-house at the moment, stormwater and wastewater is conducted by a team that does drainage services. So They are able to, so we get the efficiencies of skill sets that we can use in both those areas. If you only did 2 waters and one stayed, you're going to have to basically have a larger workforce to deal with that. Wally, any other comments from you?
Yeah, I'm not too sure where it's heading. Yeah. So at the operational level, the true, right down in the trenches, there might not be a lot of difference, but at the governance level, it will be looked at differently.
So my question is, we've got an example already in this country, water care. So what do water care do? Are they 3 or 2 waters?
So water care is a 2 water CCO and healthy waters is a 1 water CCO for Auckland. Yeah.
So healthy waters is the storm water, is it?
Yes.
So they have it separately.
Yeah.
Do we know the reasoning or the logic for that, or?
It's historical to a certain extent because water care, before they amalgamated as the 5 or 6 cities of the super city, it was a bulk water authority. So it did water treatment and distribution to the major reservoirs within each of the city, which was then reticulated by the cities, and the relationship with the customer was with the city. But ever since the super city, it's been a whole of 2 waters business from source to tap. Yeah.
Obviously they have a different scale, but do we know if there's any service agreements between them, or is it?
Yes, there are, but I don't know enough about the detail of the service agreements. I do know that they have very challenging conversations between the 2 CCOs. As you can imagine, their environment is not as pristine as ours. Here, our community would put us on notice straight away if we had a discharge in Pilot Bay that closed the beach. That's a common thing in Auckland. And so there's always an argument, it's the wastewater system's undersized, so you're getting a discharge into the stormwater that ends up on the beach. No, your stormwater hasn't been adequately built to cope with retention or things like that. Yep. So it's testy.
No, that's very helpful, thank you. Kevin, Councillor Schuler.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, guys. Just a question on just talking the difference between the 2 and the 3. How would that impact our ability if we were to choose to do this and wanted to lead it? How much more difficult would it be to lead and front foot the development of these CCOs if we were only a 2 water, and when we want to look at potentially bringing bolt-ons or other ones in? Is there a significant difference in our ability to lead and
I think as an organisation, or the ability that we have within City Waters, we can be a lead facilitator to get everyone together. I guess that's part of the collaborative process we've got to get with the other councils, is to understand how much they would rely on our capability to lead. I think we've got significantly good resource in the arrangement we have as a 3 waters to bring to the sub-region. Wally, do you want to?
I'll talk at the technical level for a minute, if you don't mind. So around the integration between especially wastewater and stormwater, we've developed a whole lot of tools to make sure that we're not getting excess water into our wastewater system from stormwater or from direct overflow. We also have groundwater models where we're looking at the groundwater flowing from the hills downstream, feeding our water plants, and then also coming through the city to the sea, and the impacts of those groundwater flows when we have a lot of rain in the catchments, the impacts on that on our wastewater system and on our stormwater system. So we're trying to take a more integrated approach to our drainage management as a whole, and it would be a pity to see that lost. And that's the kind of expertise that we believe that we can bring to other councils or other communities, if you like, around the way that integrated management of drainage can work. We think there's real opportunity there to sell that expertise.
Cool, that's
Thank you.
yeah. Now probably Paul or Catherine. I'm not sure which one wants to take this. So I'm just trying to. We just had a very brief conversation yesterday about how this actually impacts us. From a transparency point of view, from the guts of accounting for this. Because at the moment it's all in a council. You can see our accounts and how are these assets. Obviously we still own shares in a CCO, but do we still effectively have those on our balance sheet? The debt, how is that managed? The capital spend, is that still kind of part of our council? Will we be able to see that in a sort of consolidated account, etc.?
Yeah, and Catherine can add if I get it, or anything that needs to be added, but it'd be similar to how we would treat a CCO now, in that it would be, depending on the ownership structure, consolidated into our accounts. So our group accounts would still represent all assets, including those of the CCO. That would be different if the ownership was less than 50% in terms of the consolidation. It would be equity accounted at that point to actually bring those assets on, but they would be all shown in our group accounts.
So that's a really good point though. If we have a less than 50% equity, it changes the accounting model. But if we're ring fenced, for example, are we going to? Obviously there's a few assumptions here, but effectively, if it's ring fenced, we still have a direct interest, I guess, in our ring fenced part of it. So how would we deal with that?
Firstly, the water entity will also have to have its financial reports.
Yeah.
So the extent to which in its notes it would note the ring-fenced aspects of revenue, whatever will be the call of that, but obviously could get some preferences or direction, I guess, from the core councils. And then our guarantee is likely to be just for our share, and so that would be a reason in our notes to accounts to have some of that information about the basis of the guarantee. So between those two annual reports, it would be very public information about what was going on in each one. The capital program would need to come through the water entity, the capital program for water, rather than through our reports.
Yeah, I guess this is just a sort of question from transparency. And I know, if you go and have a look at the Auckland, accounts, it's quite confusing, as to what they actually do as a council, because you have water care and you have Auckland Transport and you have, Panaki and you have. So you look at the Auckland Council and you go, oh, they've got a capital spend this year of 1.6 billion, but it's actually, I don't know, 8-9 billion. When you add them all up. So yeah, I'm just trying to understand how can we deal with that. Like at the moment, and again, we've had a lot of, how many people work for the council. How do we do that? Because obviously this goes out. Is how do we still show, so we can compare apples with apples, because suddenly we're going to have, significantly less debt, we're going to have significantly less assets, we're going to have significantly less staff, employed by this organisation, and I'm just trying to figure out how we can deal with that.
Yeah, I think one, there's what we're required to produce under accounting standards, and then there's secondly what we need to report to the community in terms of transparency, which we have some discretion over what we can do, exceeding the minimum requirements under accounting standards. It's a smaller example, but the example we've been of where we've got some debt off balance sheet at the moment, and we're disclosing that debt in part of our total debt as part of additional disclosures. So that's just a small example, but we can add additional disclosure to ensure that that's transparent in terms of. Plus, as Catherine says, as the water entity itself will have its own disclosure requirements.
I understand that, and I get how that, but that's quite important to me that we actually do consolidate and say, look, this is our total position. You can compare it to the last 10 years, because otherwise we're going to start from scratch we all know how easy it is to spin stories and use statistics to make things look good. But and that's part of this benchmarking exercise, I guess, across the country as well. Is it's really hard when everyone does it differently to actually bring that back and say, well, this is the total for this council. So Councillor Roseboom.
Thanks, Mayor. My question is around, we're currently in-house. We've got a proposed model of a three-water CCO. How do we transition from one to the other, and what's the time frame for the transition? So do we have a council, a committee that appoints the board? How do we set that up?
I'll try and give a quick answer. It's quite a bit of work, especially where you've got multiple councils. So the way it's mapped out at the moment is you get a commitment agreement, which is your first point between councils to agree, exactly as you said, a governance structure for the establishment, not for the, So there's a commitment agreement to get a governance structure in place, agree how you're going to resource the establishment phase. We have to put this as an implementation plan into our water service delivery plan, which you're going to be considering in July. So you will see an outline of that. Probably before that, you'll get an outline. But the commitment agreement then moves into a phase where those that are signed up to it will collectively, at this level, agree the constitution of this organisation, the shareholders' agreement, and all the bits that sit around those establishment principles you guys have already had a first look at and are framing up. Once that's agreed, you go into the, this is now the real deal, because in parallel there'll be people working furiously in the operational space, in the people and workforce space. There's a number of other items that have to be done, like the relationship agreements, the service level agreements between council activities, etc. So there's a whole lot, but we have a roadmap for that, and we've started just talking at staff level, how could this play out? So that's where it's at the moment.
Yes.
So from that committee structure, have you any idea of what it's going to look like? Like, are we going to be part of that committee? Is it going to be an independent view or a combination of both that's put together to do the establishment of the CCO and then do the interview process for the potential board? How's that put together, please?
That's to be agreed in the commitment agreement, how you wish to set that initial phase up, the establishment phase. So it will be a choice made by each of the elected members, groups of elected members, on what goes into that. Once they get to the next phase, and it's the start of recruiting a board chair, an establishment board chair and board, that's very much part of the shareholder agreement and the shareholder council. So there will be elected members involved in that, highly likely. It's not going to be, anything's going to just be, staff led at that level. Yep.
Councillor Baker.
Morena koutou. Thank you for the report and the kōrero so far. Granted, we're kind of asking a lot of operational questions that I guess will be fleshed out in the coming phases, and this is more gate one as opposed to this council confirming its position on a multi-CCO. But I'd be really interested to know, because you've sprinkled answers throughout, looking at point 62 on the report, which is page 157 as I'm reading it. The key themes from comments which express the negative view of the proposed model, at a high level, general distrust, cost concerns, bureaucracy and inefficiencies, loss of local control, financial risk and governance. Can you provide a kind of a nice succinct response to those concerns? And the challenge with the answer is, I want you to answer it like you're talking to a 17-year-old hautapu baker who's not so interested in local government and more into sports and kapaka. Here's the challenge.
No challenge.
I haven't got a good answer for a 17-year-old Hautapu Baka, but I think it's just the themes that came through, you know, it's an assessment of trying to, you know, people often talk about the size of the bureaucracy and so on, and I think part of that is until you know, and it probably relates a bit to the question asked about what is the governance going to look like for a multi-council CCO, you know, ideally, are you adding another layer or what is happening, you know, so yeah, that's, but I think the principles that we come up with the establishment, which will be very much around, you know, things that we agree with, a lot of it is about efficiency, value for money, fairness and equity, transparency, all of those key bits. So it's, you know, it'll be linked to that.
Yeah, thank you. I think those questions are completely valid, and really it's someone that has not been as deeply involved as we have. They're looking for assurance or reassurance that we've got it covered, and I think it's beholden on all of us to make sure that we have, and we can respond to those questions by, I think, giving the due diligence that we are around this table at the moment and in the future. We'll answer those questions for the community. So at the point in time that we're at right now, I think they're completely valid and totally expected.
Councillor Schooler.
Thank you, Me Mahe. Thank you for the report and for some of those answers. Just going to go back to the cost model and the availability of that. I feel that we did, in the consultation document, we sold the idea of the joint CCO being more cost effective for ratepayers and by 2034, I think it was, but there was quite a lot of concern by us as well as other people about not seeing the detail of the cost models. So I just wonder what the timing is of the internal in-house model being available for us, please, as a first question.
Right, so the model's largely built. It is exactly the same data as has been produced over the last few months, just slightly updated for timing of capital and that. So it's not new underlying data. What we're trying to do in the model is be very clear about how we calculate the kind of ratios. So what's your debt capacity, just so you can understand how are assumed savings flowing through costs, so you can understand how that is done. You can ask us to do some sensitivity on that sort of work, but the assumptions about cost savings are assumptions based on evidence from other jurisdictions that have done this. There's nothing inherently in those assumptions that we have suddenly created our own or identified particular savings we could do now that we aren't doing. We're just saying, based on those overseas jurisdictions and the kind of savings they had, this is an assumption of 1% cumulative for the next 10 or 15 years is a reasonable assumption, but you can see how that is flowing into the costs, to the pricing, to things like that. One of the kind of insights sits around the level of debt that this entity could carry, and when we consulted, it was based on the Martin Jenkins model that standardised the free funds from operations to debt, that sort of debt level at 10%, and sort of said, well, more or less your price path that you have in the LTP is more or less the right one. Under the model, we've experimented with lower free funds from operations. LGFA would accept 8%, and that shows how much price does not need to increase if you accept a higher debt to free funds from operations. So it just starts to help you understand the levers and the implications of the different models. So we would like to be able to get that to you the week before the workshop, to see if you had time, if anyone who does like to play with kind of numbers and models can do that.
What's that date, sorry?
The workshop is the 24th of June.
So we'll try and get it out that previous week. So it has gone through an initial peer review, and our analysts have been working through kind of corrections, taking on some of those ideas. We've also provided drafts as we go to Thames Coromandel and Whakatane, and Western Bay so that they can give us feedback, think how they might use it. And so we're still kind of developing it, but we would expect to have something that week before. Oh, yes, so it was reviewed by MAFIC.
Okay, no, good. And I think because that has been quite a big issue, I would like to have that before we make the decision to reconfirm the CCO. I also will probably, when we see it, look and say, are those savings possible with a potential amalgamation of councils anyway? Is that just part of what might happen over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years anyway? But I've got a few questions, am I allowed to keep going? Thank you. So just, does their model include the potential, we know that we're slow in getting consents out to the people of Tauranga when they want to develop. We've just heard that the consent process will need to go through Tauranga City Council and then go to the Water CCO. So are we aware of how we manage not extending the consent timeline for just the normal person wanting to put something extra on their house or do a renovation? Have we taken that into account in the model?
No, the model is just the costs of the waters entity.
Okay, that's
And-
fine.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're in the middle of our first engagement, and for me, this has been, it's wonderful to be able to get the number of people that have talked to us about waters as well as the annual plan. It's a much harder exercise if you've got a CCO. We wouldn't be able to face our public to say, oh, we'll actually find out what's happening because the CCO is the one that's doing it. So I would just ask from the perspective of engagement, how would the people of Tauranga engage with a joint CCO in the same way they have in this and with the feedback they've given for this annual plan? How would that happen? Because we won't be able to front the same questions if it's a CCO that, although it's council-controlled organisation, we do not have the same ability to know what capital projects, to be able to say, no, we don't want those capital projects. There's not nearly as much transparency for us on our CCOs currently. So how would you think the engagement with the public happen, or the people happens, if we have a joint CCO on waters, please?
I can only comment on what is in the sort of draft legislation and how CCOs would operate. The statement of expectation, which is a joint statement of expectation by the partner councils, will clearly spell out what the CCO is delivering for all, and it's not just ratepayers, anyone using the water services they deliver as a utility. They respond with a water services strategy, which again has to be agreed to by the partner councils that will achieve the outcomes of the statement of expectation. That has various requirements in terms of reporting, but it's also linked to the economic regulator and what the expectations there would be. So if you saw what was up in Auckland recently, they've got a slightly different terminology for water services strategy, but they locked in 3 years of tariff and cost of service for the whole of Auckland. It was signed off, went through a process, and it laid out what the capital works program would be, the renewals. And they basically have to work within that agreed. They cannot deviate, or they can't. I think your challenge here is greater because you have several other trade-offs you're having to make from multiple activities. The basket of services that the utility has to deliver are locked in. They will be agreed, and they'll have to deliver those. And they cannot vary that unless they come to their partner owners to say something else has happened. We've had a Christchurch event or whatever. We need to do something different here, and that has to be worked through.
And on an annual basis, would they be open to be, the CCO, would we be able to put in the statement of an expectation that annually they need to put out the ability for people to submit, and they sit round for 5 days and hear submissions, and we don't do that with our current CCO. So would we be doing this with a CCO?
As I say, until the final legislation lands, but there's definitely scope for the owner councils to build this statement of expectation to meet their needs. So that may well be an important, as I read it. I don't know what's going to come in the final version.
If I may, through you, Mr. Mayor, this annual plan has been a bit different because it's had a strong focus with local waters done well. Over the last 20 years of annual plans and long-term plans, the proportion of submissions on pure waters issues, below ground things particularly, is very small. You know, if we ran an ordinary LTP, and Rick and Stevie was here, we'd be able to back this up. We don't get a lot of submissions on just waters conversations. It's mostly about above ground services or above ground facilities that generates the feedback. So this is a different experience through this process because we ran local waters done well. You had a lot more waters conversations than normal. And Rick, feel free.
And I acknowledge that, but I also know that if people are more aware that 35% of their rates are for water and that 35 went to 45 one year, you probably will get, you might get a continuing conversation that the people do want to talk to us about the cost of water. So, but thank you for that. Sorry, and just in terms of the reporting of the entity, again, at the moment we have TCCs reported and then all of the CCOs together in one column are reported. So do you think that's actually transparent enough if that's 35% of our of rates to be reported as one group of CCOs, or would they be separate?
Again, it would be, like, to meet the accounting requirements, it would be parent plus group, but we can report more than the accounting requirements. And given the size of the CCO, I think we would be doing that. Provided
elected members still said, let's be transparent rather than let's just hide numbers in a column of numbers. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Correct.
Thank you. In terms of Jeremy's comment, over the years we have had a high level of community satisfaction around the waters, and that's why we hadn't received many submissions. But I think the concerns expressed here is that we're moving away from what they have comfort with. And I've heard some reference to overseas. We have some evidence that we've had positive impacts, but so looking at locally in Auckland with the shift to water care and then subsequent Super City, are there some positive outcomes there that you can perhaps use as a model to reassure those who have got concerns?
Thanks for that. Yeah, certainly. I think I've been here for quite a while, like yourself. There have been times in the past where we were going to do something different, like we went to water metering. The community said works perfectly fine while we're doing this, and it was a very narrow margin, and we went there. We would never go back there because the evidence, again, was gathered from external. It was international. It was what's happening elsewhere. Yes, you're going to drive water use, people be aware of how they use water efficiently, and you know, we got a lot of wins out of that, but it was making a difference. And we're kind of in the same space here at the moment. So we're looking at, you know, how do people drive efficiencies? What has been successful elsewhere, and why is New Zealand struggling with the likes of Wellington and other places, you know, with aging assets and poor compliance, etc. And the reasoning behind a lot of those is size and scale and the connecting with your customer. A lot of times, local authorities are, it's again the bureaucracy kind of like thing a bit. It's like, do you have a relationship with the person using your service? And some of the activities of council are good because people walk into a sports facility or whatever. Until we went with water metering, we never had a one-to-one relationship with a customer. You know, guy got a bill, they said, why is it so high? Or I'm happy. Or not. It was just sitting in your rates. And to a certain extent, recently with this local water done well, we went out and we spoke to the large water customers, and it was quite a different conversation. It was, yeah, we want to have a relationship with a commercial entity about, you know, how we get our services, and you know, we want that relationship. So I would say that it's hopefully going to be more focused on good customer service, really good customer service, and consistency in that service over time. But yeah, the outcomes they've had, definitely significant reduction in operating and capital works costs as to where they were tracking, and that's in Victoria, the UK, other parts of Europe. So that's the evidence that we've got.
For Auckland, though, is there anything there that you can really hang your hat on in terms of, hey, yeah, this works?
I can't really speak for what's happened with post the super city, because you had 5 councils that were amalgamated and they had quite a different challenge. Some of them really their assets were in poor shape, others were far better. So they've had to, over nearly 15 years now, harmonise their costs so that it's working better over there. So I can't really comment exactly where they were going to be tracking. But certainly when they put water meters in, they got a massive downturn. They got more water out of, more use out of the existing dams. They've got a couple of dams and then the Waikato River. They've got other challenges for the future, so.
And just, yeah, the water care, I think from the people I've spoken to, they've gone through a few iterations, and obviously there's been things that haven't worked and they've had to do restructures, and, in all intents and purposes, I think it's pretty positive feedback where they are right now. But in saying that, there is significant parts of Auckland that don't have capacity to develop. And this is that sort of council versus CCO, because potentially it doesn't make sense to invest, but now that's constraining the city. So how do we navigate that and get that right in order to make sure that where the city wants to develop, there is that capacity when potentially it's outside of the control of council?
Again, the CCO has to deliver what the council has included in its plan and its requirements. So there's no way it can object to that. It'll have to look at other ways of doing it. In cases where infrastructure is, quite a way away from our existing system, they're going to have to look at other solutions, provided that they are acceptable to the stakeholders and the people in that area, because there are alternatives to having everything come through the bulk system. It can be done as satellite, but we've typically not done anything that is contrary to the city plan, and it will retain that.
Yeah. Okay, and then another, I guess, just talking to people, there's a lot of angst, I guess, out there that we have done this well, so why change? And you're going to take on councils. Be very careful, around what you're taking on, because Tauranga residents, we're going to end up subsidising other councils. We're going to be in a worse position than we are now. So I guess my question is around ring fencing. Does that take away a lot of those concerns?
Well, yes, it will be very transparent if there was ever a decision to cross-subsidise. So the idea with ring fencing is that there is no cross-subsidising initially, and it will be up to councils to kind of make a conscious decision to say, okay, we'll kind of accept some more harmonised pricing. And so I guess we'd be looking for that evidence that it was going to be in the interests of Tauranga City ratepayers to make that call. And I think the journey is normally that over time it does make sense. But, and as Steve said with Auckland, that's just that journey of relative investment and increasing prices appropriately in areas that maybe have been underpriced, so that therefore they're underinvesting. So those kind of things can happen over time.
And so then I guess probably back to the Waters team, we go into this arrangement with other councils. Obviously we're going to do a lot of due diligence, but what we've seen in Wellington, for example, some of these things don't actually come to light until you've got water pissing out of a street, you know. So, you know, in that time that we're ring fenced, you know, like how long is it until, like, you know, let's say we take on another council that we're not actually aware of the issues they have. You know, how long is it going to take a CCO to kind of figure out the lay of the land and where everyone's assets are at, so that I guess it's just that assurance again to our people is that, you know, we will know by the time we harmonise or whatever that actually that council has a lot of issues and a lot of capital to be, and we're not going to touch, you know, harmonising or cross-subsidising them. What's that time period, I guess, is?
The first iteration of a water service delivery plan is the foundational document that will set out a lot of this information. So it has to be signed off by each chief executive once it's adopted by the council. So it's an assurance that the capital works program, the investment plan, the way the assets have been described and the state of the business is accurate. So that's a first, but we're also aware that, you know, people don't know, or they might assign well, we think it's in that range, but there is a bit of verification going to be done as part of that by the DIA. Really, if you ring fence for a period of time and you put that into your, I suppose, your establishment, your constitution, you could probably cover off review points in the process thereafter and say, we're at this point, we're comfortable the assets are exactly as you described, or they're operating, and you know, or we're going to have to revise. But within the context of the ring-fenced investment, the asset you brought in or the liability you brought into this arrangement, it needs to be set up in that way. That's just.
So, you know, obviously, you know, I really rate our team, and that's what I guess I'm asking from your perspective. How long would it take you to you know, being working in an organisation until you can be certain that you know, Western Bay's assets are what they say they are? Like, what is that sort of process? So,
I might ask Wally to comment because no, under the bus again. No, but I think the reason I say that is because we've been jointly operating and maintaining these now for a few years, we do have a bit of an understanding of breakage rates and the service that they have. Granted, in rural areas you have a slightly different service level, and as what you'd expect, say, in the Mount Industrial where you've got export goods and stuff. But I think we do understand the assets a bit better and how they operate them and what needs renewal, etc. But in case you wish to.
What about, you know, we've talked about Thames, we've talked about Whakatane, so like how long does it take to get under the hood of those and you know, get a pretty good understanding that actually we're you know, these are as sold to us, I guess is the.
Yeah, thanks. The simple answer is trust, but verify.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll be looking at their asset management plans, we'll be looking at the condition of their assets, the condition rating, and also the confidence levels that they have in that information. And then we'll be verifying some of it on the ground as well. So it's going to take some time, and, you know, we can't say it's going to be 1 year or 2 years, depending on the size and the quality of those assets. It's going to take a little bit of time to bed in. So they're not simple assets, and because they're all underground, it takes a little bit more effort to really understand the condition of them. So I'm sorry, I can't give you a timeline because it'll be different for whatever community we work with.
Do you think 5-7 years?
Easy, yeah, well within that, yeah.
No, that's the question, I guess, because we're talking here. We've loosely said we're probably ring fenced for at least 5 years. So, in that time frame, you know, you're pretty confident that we'd know exactly where everything was at.
Yes, haven't gone through other amalgamations in the past. Yes, it'd be well within that time frame. Yeah.
No, that's great. It was a concern of people out there around, you know, what we're taking on and understanding that. So that certainly gives me a lot of.
We had already, with the previous 3 water reforms, looked at a larger group the whole of Bay of Plenty, and included with Thames Coromandel and others. So we have seen what their disclosures were through that process, and so have a bit of an understanding of that as well.
Cool. Councillor Baker.
Kia ora. Just wanting to expand on some of this kōrero a little bit. Our preferred option is obviously a joint CCO, and Western Bay has been identified as an ideal partner in that. If later on down the track we amalgamated as councils as a whole, do you think there would still be a need for an independent CCO, or would that all just come back in one big house?
I would say that you'd still keep it as a CCO. If anything, it might even become a bigger CCO in the future, because size and scale will always bring you better outcomes. Councillor Rolliston.
Yeah, actually, my question is sort of related to Councillor Baker's. If we, our preferred is a multi-council CCO, but obviously that's in hands of other councils or central government. And then if not a TCC, a CCO, we, from what I understand, we have a number of CCOs and we can decide. So have we thought about this before anyway without the three local waters done well? Because if we're saying, well, there we've got options, but without the pressure of this, have we explored it anyway to say that that is a lot more efficient anyway?
There was some work done, part of the, what was it called, Local Government Futures. But again, it's like there were benefits identified, but whenever you've had councils wanting to come together to agree, it's not, you don't get that agreement. So some of that was done in the past. It showed that there were definite benefits. The last time we did it in a bit of detail, we did sit down with the Western Bay and said, well, what can we do together? And so we do lab services, we do the maintenance contract. So that's about as far as we got, and we try to get other councils to also be part of that, but very hard.
I think I'm more around just ourselves. Why haven't we explored, or have we explored a CCO for our water services? This has been decided, or this has become an option, our first option, if I'm reading it right, and I've come a little bit late to what's happening, but we're one of the preferred option. Well, the preferred option is a multi-council, and then if not a Tauranga Council CCO for our waters, have we looked at that before without the local waters done well?
Others might add to this, but there was some work, very, very high-level work done, probably 10 years ago, effectively, in terms of looking at options, but not to any great extent.
Could I just ask another question, if you don't mind? So Te Rangapu have submitted and sort of supporting a multi-council CCO. If I look at Watercare, look at their board of directors, might have changed, but they don't have any mana whenua representation or any nature. Obviously, this council has moved into a direction. Have we looked further at what that might actually look like, or is that to come?
Yes, that would be to come, but I would recommend that at some early point we engage with Watercare to understand how they've gone through that process. They recently did appoint a new board member who...
Richie. His name's Richie.
Yeah. But I think it's useful to understand that, Councillor. But certainly it's in terms of the board capability and the skill sets they want, and the the association with the land and how that's brought to the table as being part of their discussions.
Councillor Crowther.
No, it's me.
Councillor Rosebone, you're in.
No, I was in the queue.
You're in the queue, yeah, sorry.
Stop, you know that.
So mine's,
Yeah, you can do, yeah, just,
mine's around timing, given that the Water Services Bill, third version, is still not out yet, and we've got to have this in by September the 3rd. What's our anticipated timeframe if we choose to go this way, from setting up a council, establishing a board? What's our timeframe to when we can actually say that we do actually have an official CCO and a partner ex-council? Are we talking year, 2 years?
I think when you're dealing with other councils as partners, you know, and we had a recent conversation with the people across the Kaimai. How's that going? Because they have they're signing up a commitment agreement. They've had heads of agreement for a while. There's multiple councils there. They're also conscious they're going into an interregnum period where there won't be any councils, so they're getting certain decisions made, and they're acting to go out in August to get a stand-up or establishment chaired so that can start getting coordinated collectively, and that's going to have input from all of them. You know, if it's 2 councils, we still believe it's doable to work within the constraints of the decision-making to get a water service delivery plan, to agree a commitment agreement, to start mobilising all those phases I talked about earlier, and to land a CCO on day 1 in July 2026. But we asked, again, when we asked the 6-7 councils over in the Waikato, they're going 3 in July 26, 3 in July 27, because, again, it comes to things like Mayor's asked, you know, what is their understanding of the assets, the systems, the overheads they carry, how can they move staff? There's a whole lot of intricacies. The more partners you have, the longer the runway. Yeah.
Councillor Schuler.
Thank you, Mayor. I've had my hand up, but I'm behind you rudely. Apologies. Question for you, Wally, and I suppose coming at this from a different lens and asking you your maybe a bit of a personal opinion, but you've been at the coalface for a long time. We're seen as one of the best in the country, but I'm sure it hasn't all been perfect operationally over the years. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to take the fifth on this question. I'll ask it 2 ways. With your knowledge and experience, you know, ultimately, if we combined, and do you see upside in the efficiency, our ability to, you know, the agility, adaptability, size and scale, ultimately to deliver better services for better value, if you were working under a single focused 3 waters system, under that level of management and governance versus being under a council and EMs that have got 1 million balls in the air? And so the simple question is, would you, if it was you personally, would you go? Take the fifth if you want.
Oh,
Is it on?
sorry, yeah, those, yeah, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I should take the fifth, but I'll be a fool and speak anyway. We think that there's some real upside here, and that there's real opportunity for us to lift our game as a water entity, or as a waters team. We're looking at amalgamating with another competent water operator, being Western Bay. They know what they're doing, and they are competent operators as well. And between us, I think that we've got the opportunity to do something really good here. And it'll be a little bit, well, Stephen was talking earlier about the introduction of water meters and how complex and how that took a long time to get that across the line, but there's been huge benefits from it ever since. And I think we're in a similar sort of position here with the way that we structure and deliver our water services in the future, that there's huge upside and future benefits to our community as a whole around the efficiencies, and also bringing a level of professionalism and being an attractive employer that other water professionals will want to join. So yeah, I am in support totally.
I liked how you dodged the elected members question there.
Thank you. I'll shut myself off again.
Councillor Crowther.
Yes, Steve, you talked before about size and scale. You've said that twice, and you I think I wrote down your quote right, size and scale will always bring you better outcomes, which I thought was an interesting little quote. The minister seems to be saying 200,000, so that's, we could maybe park that before my question. You'd also made the comment Auckland had quite a different challenge because there were 5 councils and they were all in different states, or whatever the wording was you used. I mean, potentially that's exactly what we're dealing with, I would have thought. I would have thought we're talking about, like, we've got a smaller scale than Auckland, that they've got legacy issues. Our potential partners definitely have legacy issues, but also have other issues. Not saying they're all bad, good and bad issues. And I would have thought, to Councillor Kurak's point, that rather than taking models from overseas that have been heavily critiqued by independent agencies and have significantly questioned the benefits that are being stated from both within those countries and outside those countries, that we will want to look at Auckland and say, let's get under the hood a bit here, because the issues that the Mayor has raised and that others have raised that apply to Auckland, you know, to me, like, you know, just to sort of say size and scale, you know, it needs to be much more precise than that, because Auckland's got, you know, heading towards 2 million, but we're on our own at about what the minister, you know, within a few years will be spot on, even without Western Bay, for exactly what the minister's saying. And with Western Bay will be well over the limit. So that's my preface to saying, if your view of it is correct, why, when we see the financial analysis and the consultation, we put it out in the consultation document saying in 2034 people will be $30 better off? Why are we kind of having this view that all of it comes from size and scale? Surely that is evidence on its own, if that's worth anything, that's evidence to say the benefits do not come from putting it into a bigger multi-council entity. It's quite clear in black and white on that document, and the people of Tauranga have seen it. To Councillor Rolliston's point, you know, there'll come a point where we'll lose a bit of control and become a minority shareholder if the size and scale argument is true. But it says in black and white here that $30 difference, a lot of people in our community are arguing, well, for $30, if you really want to do a CCO, go for it. But for $30, just keep it under our control, because then when it comes to the, you know, direct instructions to the board of directors, it'll be quite straightforward. We'll be in a meeting like this and we'll know what our people think because we've had a consultation, and we will just instruct them and we'll say to them, in return for that, sorry, you're paying $30 extra in 2034, but you know, that'll soon fizzle away anyway because we'll be driving efficiencies. And so that's really the heart of, like, I'm just trying to tease together all the different views, and that's really the nub of where I see there's a disconnect between the actual evidence we've got and the statements that keep getting made.
I don't believe there was a question there. It's, I mean, I think
I'm asking for clarity around that.
Well, from a staff perspective, we've provided all the reports and analysis. If this is a now decision for council as to whether the $30 benefit is something that is worth making this decision on, then I think that becomes a council decision. So,
the question is, how can we, I guess, can we get behind these numbers so that we can see whether it really is a $30 or whether, because there is a view there that could be valid, like the size and scale, but it's just we're not seeing evidence of that. And when I've done my due diligence and looked at international research around it, it doesn't necessarily stack up. So I'm trying to understand, is there something that can be shown to us to show multi-council is better than a Tauranga CCO, you know, significantly better?
So through you, Your Worship, I think that would be the intent of the workshop that we're planning for later in June, effectively, to go through the financial modelling in more detail to give the council some more comfort around lifting the lid of where savings will come from.
Councillor Taylor.
speak, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Schooler.
Thank you, Me Mahe. So just in terms of the timing, and I do understand size and scale, although sometimes as council we're actually charged more because we're bigger and people think we can afford it, so put that aside. But in terms of the timing, and I'm probably feeling that we will end up hopefully with an amalgamated council in a few years and probably a CCO, but I'm concerned about the speed at which we're required to do it. So just in terms of your draft implementation plan, if we felt that that might happen and we might form a CCO by 2027 rather than 2026, and therefore we can learn from others, this was raised talking about the wider Bay of Plenty in terms of that, is there any issue with us starting as just Tauranga, doing the same as we're doing now, knowing we're trying to learn to see what the best option will be and thinking we probably will be a CCO? Is there any harm if we've got all our resources in place and we've already got a plan of remaining as Tauranga on its own, continuing the conversations, having longer to develop what's going to be a really important agreement with anyone we partner with, and learning along the way and just making the decision over a bit longer time? Is the speed actually going to add benefits for Tauranga or add extra risk, I think? And that might be a Māori question because it's a biggie.
Thank you. I think there's several things in that question of yours. So certainly, if you act on your own, with the intent to become a multi-council CCO, you will be looking at the readiness of your partners, but also what makes it attractive to other councils is if they could come under that commitment agreement at the front end, because they have skin in the game. They're able to help shape the statement of expectation, work with their stakeholders. If the time that you have to influence or get something established as the front end, it's at that point. If you set up something that's too hard to modify and change and others don't want to join it later on, that's a risk that would sit there, because some of them will feel that, this horse is bolted. But I think that's just one of the comments I'd have. I'd say that there are others. I think it was 11 groupings at the moment around the whole of New Zealand that want to go multi, and every time one of them sets up, it will mean that the expertise, the talent pool, everything else is going to be directed more towards the early starters. So, yeah, we got to look at that as well. There's several elements in there, but yeah, I'd say you can do it, but it's there's always a counter to it.
Councillor Taylor. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh, may I add to that? Yeah, so there's obviously the establishment costs would fall solely on this council, and the establishment costs for the Western Bay would fall solely on that council as well. So we're doubling the establishment costs up front for both organisations to then look at coming together in the future as well. So there would be a greater amount of cost in doing it that way, rather than us standing up together. We were sharing those establishment costs.
And okay, that's a good point to raise, but we also know we're going to be partnering with a council who's about to have an election, so there could be quite a different term. So I guess I'm just aware we're trying to rush things through. We want to do a great job. We're already doing a good job. I'm probably not understanding quite why a year delay will actually, other than if we're trying to establish things, so sort of get an answer. Thank you.
I guess, yeah, just to comment, like the reason we're rushing is the legislation says we have to have a water services delivery plan by the 3rd of September. So that's...
Make sure it's the right
Well, that's the legislation. That's what we're working to. So once we've kind of got that, I don't know. It just seems to make sense to me that, you know, that's the starting part, and I don't see why within a year you can't come to, you know. I think that's plenty of time to set it up and make it right. That's just my personal opinion. Councillor Taylor.
My question sort of casts a view to the future of New Zealand Inc., I suppose. If we go down this path and we have a multi-council CCO, at some point there'll be councils that have decided to stay in their own lane, probably smaller councils I'm thinking, that potentially wouldn't have the horsepower to do the same thing themselves, and they may be directed by central government to join. Have you put any thought into how that might happen? Would they become a shareholder, or would they be would we provide a service under a contract to them? What would happen there?
Yes, Councillor. So some have approached us, and because we're doing what we're doing, and said, you know, we might not be up for a partnership arrangement, but would be very interested in getting services and or, you know, the expertise that you would have in this organisation. So yes, we've got a number of them that have talked to us. They're kind of on the books, you know, as to people who would want to have develop a relationship with a CCO in the future. It could be a contractual one, yeah.
Councillor Baker. Oh, no. Right, are we, Councillor Crowther?
I think we're kind of clear enough on the Taumata Arawai role and what they're, you know, the direction they're heading. It's been signalled, it's been implemented to a large extent. The issue around the Commerce Commission, I was going to say ComCom, like, to me that's as blurry as anything. So I don't know if it's just I'm not privy to the information, but I'm really interested, like, this idea that councils will retain control. You know, the talk around the traps is that that's a nice thought, but central government regulation will ensure that does not happen, that it will be so heavily regulated by the ComCom that all the key decisions, in other words, you couldn't sort of say, no, our priority is to keep it really affordable, keep the prices down, and just delay some stuff. It'd be like, no, because you're going to have all these criteria you have to meet. I'm just wondering, given that I'm looking probably at Catherine and Steve, like, you probably know a lot more than I do about that. Can you maybe play out sort of what scope we might have with this CCO compared to other CCOs to actually directly influence what they do?
So they haven't come out exactly and described their approach to economic regulation, but we have talked to some people about economic regulation as it applies to other utilities, and the kind of pricing controls that they have on, which sort of sit around asset valuation, etc. So I don't think that it will be unusual. I don't think it will be particularly prescriptive from the point of view of waters, and I think that there is likely to be an ability for these organisations overall to charge sufficiently for the work they do. But I think within that also there will be opportunity for councils to sort of provide guidance in terms of affordability. It's not like the councils are shareholders wanting profit. So it's a different perspective, and I think there will be opportunity for that to flow through in those statements of expectation. If that's helpful.
I just from listening to the Commerce, I think it's got to be financially sustainable. So they are making sure that it's financially sustainable, and if they don't believe that you're investing enough for the future, then they'll come down. So, that's really the thing, and then they're just making sure that what you're doing is sensible. You're not over-investing and charging people too much. So, I think as long as you're making decisions or directions within the waters entity being financially sustainable, then there won't be any issues. But if you try to go outside that and underinvest or overinvest, then that's when you'll have an issue.
I guess, well, maybe I'll try and get a bit a clear example is that if you take this current long-term plan for Tauranga, there's been a conscious decision, which has now become a little bit more extreme, whereby water's investment was delayed, and it's now 51% of our CapEx program in the second half of this LTP is waters. So the reason for that is, according to the commissioners, because they wanted to prioritise some city centre development and some other infrastructure. So that's a perfectly good decision by a democratic, or in that case an undemocratic, council to make, because they kind of weigh up they're in a governance role, they weigh that all up. So the issue that I would have is, assume that was the right decision for the sake of the argument, then would the same situation, in a decade's time with the CCO, could that happen? Could the council say to the Waters CCO, I know you you're meant to be doing all this stuff in the next few years, but we've got these sports facilities and other things we'd like you to prioritise. We can't burden our ratepayers too much. So we want to do what we did a decade earlier and actually, shunt the waters forward for a few years. And I'm not seeing whether that's going to be possible. And I'm just highlighting that unless you've got word that it might be, it seems like that is different from what it is now. And the question is it different with the CCO, or is it only different because of the Commerce Commission's economic regulator role?
Yeah, we're trying to imagine what's coming. But the Commerce Commission, we will get more clarity in the upcoming months. Bearing in mind, they will, for councils that stay within or keep the business in council, they still regard it as a water service provider. Water organisation, as it's described, is where a water service provider gets a WO or CCO to deliver. They're going to be required to report exactly the same criteria, bearing in mind that the one sits with a different credit limit and FFO arrangement to the other. ComCon are going to say, are you affordable, sustainable, are you investing enough, are your assets meeting criteria, to both. The affordability issue that I think was alluded to a little bit earlier, in which you guys probably have a conversation when the financial modelling gets done, is where your range of FFO falls within the limits that they are comfortable with, and the ability for a board of a CCO to make decisions to say, we can keep costs down, or we can create more headroom to do other big investments for growth. Those decisions still fall within acceptable range for the Commerce Commission, the economic regulator, but the decisions are there to be made. And I don't know if you want to comment, Catherine. That's an engineer trying to explain something, sorry.
Well, I think for me that's the advantage of a CCO, because you've got an independent board who will be able to make the decision whether that's a prudent financial decision for that water entity or not, and can push back on a political decision. So if that means that you're under-investing in your water entity, then they will, if they're doing a good job as governance, they will say, well, this is we can reduce it this much, but that's it. Within the and this is the issue we've got around the country, and I think why we're here with Local Water's done well, because there's a lot of political decisions that have made have taken funding away from waters that councils haven't delivered to the standard they need to, and that's the issue, and that's what this is going to sort out, and that's what the Commerce Commission will also be looking at. Are they under-investing so that they're going to have a problem later, or not? And I don't see that as a disadvantage. It'll be a discussion between the political leaders and the CCO as to what the margin is to continue to deliver for that entity and for the betterment of the city. So, Councillor Rolliston.
There's a couple of quick questions, I hope, and I might be just getting up to speed. But first question is, are we aware of any other currently operating multi-council CCOs in the country? On any activity. Because we talk about water care, but that's Auckland talking to Auckland.
Botlas?
Sorry? Yeah.
There is a few procurement.
Yeah, I mean, because I guess the point, well, you have going to have multiple shareholders. You can talk of, bit of expectations and stuff, and everyone has different expectations. So probably that was more an FYI. Secondly, if we're sort of, and I can understand it from a number of reasons, size and scale we've talked around, the fact that the source is coming from another district and ending up in another district, whether it's whatever waters it is, and that can see the advantage in a multi-CCO. If it wasn't, did we look at another option of just shared services without is that an alternative, or is that explored? Or is CCO the only option that you can see of achieving that outcome?
We haven't done extensive work on shared service options. It's been the models that you've seen now.
Although it's kind of the current model, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that we're currently essentially in a shared service arrangement with Western Bay at the moment in terms of maintenance of the infrastructure. We're on the same digital platform in terms of communicating and working with the customers, and we're actually treating all of our water treatment plants are actually located in the Western Bay of Plenty District Council, servicing the city, and likewise we're treating their wastewater. So I do agree we're in a similar model to that now.
Right, Councillor Crowther.
I'm trying to look at what might be going on with our the business case and the other documentation we've got that makes the results we get quite different to some other councils. Well, that we and others get. So, say Waikato, for example, and Tauranga are sort of looking at multi-CCOs, and the same arguments that are being presented, according to some of the financial analysis, which is that it's better financially, that when we look at the balance of both the cost for the CCO and the cost for the remainder of council, that make it better to do that. In our case, those arguments are being run by Christchurch, Dunedin, Invercargill, Nelson, etc. And they've got similar people to do similar analysis, crunch the numbers, and they've said, we've got to keep it in-house because the numbers show that we've got to keep it in-house. And when you sort of peel back and you go as deep as you can't get in any cases that I've seen to the heart of the modelling and the assumptions. You just see a list of assumptions like we've got, and it all seems to be proprietary, which is why, I guess, we've had that discussion that Deputy Mayor raised. But I'm trying to figure out, do you have any insight into why the same kind of analysis shows such contrasting views? And I guess the clue that I've taken is it because there are more South Island councils and areas which Christchurch accepted, maybe don't have the growth pressures that are reaching those conclusions? Is it to do with growth? Is that the difference? Waikato and, Waipa, Hamilton, Waikato, Tauranga, Western Bay, we've all got growth pressures. Ones that are keeping it in-house, Rotorua, Kawerau, they haven't got such growth pressure. Is that the answer? If so, can you please enlighten us a little bit about it? Because it's a topical issue for people.
In terms of financial modelling, I haven't looked at anyone else's models, and I just reiterate, in our model, we've used the same base information for everything, but said there is there's sort of three factors, if you like. There's how much capacity you've got to deliver capital, so how much can you borrow? How much do you need to rely on your pricing on bringing in more cash because you're limited in what you can borrow? And can you make efficiency assumptions based on any evidence, and how do they rank? And then, as we discussed earlier, there's also that short term, there are overheads that will need to be adjusted in the parent organisations, and so you need a transition to avoid too much stranded overhead. Those are sort of just the components that will sit behind anybody's model, and it will be depending on what those councils have as assumptions and how much debt they have and the extent to which debt is an issue for them.
Right. Well, I think we have done the questions. Thank you very much. So now we do have some recommendations. And I am happy to move those recommendations. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Roseboom, thank you. So I guess, you know, this has been a really good discussion. This is a big decision. We're not making a final decision today. I guess we're just, we are, I guess, around this, approves the three water approach. It's pushing us in that direction, but I think throughout there's always off ramps to any of these things, and obviously we're also talking about moving forward, continuing to go down the track of a multi-council controlled organisation. For me, I think I was on the fence coming into this meeting around is it 2, is it 3? I think if we actually look at it, we're looking at a 2.5, where some stormwater assets are moved across, others aren't, and agreements in place, which is fairly well how we manage things at the moment. So that has given me personally a lot of comfort around, because I probably came into this meeting thinking probably more on the 2 waters and keeping stormwater out, but I can see it makes a lot of sense with some of those assets to go across. And I guess that's always a challenge. If you're a governor of an asset that you don't own, even if you maybe manage it, it can cause some issues sometimes, because you don't have full control, I guess, around that. So, that's a political decision, I guess, for everyone to take on board. But I think a lot of the financial will hopefully be answered in June, with our own financial model being developed that we can look under the hood, we can play around with. We'll be able to see exactly what it is, what the assumptions are, how we got to those results. So I'm very comfortable on that, that we have that option going forward. But I just really thank staff for their time. I think it's been a really good discussion today, and certainly in my mind has cemented a few things and changed my mind on a few others. So that was very useful, I think, and as we said, this is a big decision, and as we go through the next few months, that will continue and we'll start to shape up and finalise. I still see the benefits of scale. Our closest neighbour who we share pipes with, it just is all, it makes a huge amount of sense to me to be one, to be working together and with them. So, I'm very supportive of these recommendations and going forward. Councillor Roseboom.
Thanks, Mayor. No, I support the current recommendation as it is. It's not a commitment by us to actually have a CCO, but it is a commitment for us to move forward with the planning. I'm very interested to see where recommendation E2 goes around how we structure ourselves, how we plan the development council, who's on that development council, how we edit or function our statement of intent with partnering councils. By being in the front of this discussion, we can control it and we have some control over the outcome. So by being on this ramp, we can control where we go and how it functions going forward. From us personally, the advantage of scale, it's there. In reference to the CCO portion, I'm struggling to see where we're going to find dedicated governors to run on a board that are actually more skilled than our current waters team. I'm a little bit concerned there. Is that knowledge in this country to do that, to achieve that? But as we're currently going now, I do support this, and I do thank the staff for all their efforts up to this point. And I'm looking forward to what this service delivery plan draft looks like before we send it off to Wellington. Thank you.
Councillor Curate.
So we've been out to the community and we've sort of heard either way, and there's nothing really clear and substantial about, well, you know, the preference from the community either way. But in reading submissions and particularly hearing from our waters team, you know, who over the years have done an excellent job, and I recall whenever a waters budget item came to council, there was a simple tick off because of that trust and confidence that we had in that team. So today, when, you know, I hear from the team that they're really in favour of a CCO, that, you know, to me, particularly that I've been around, you know, this organisation for a fair while, that gives me the confidence. If they are confident in moving forward with the proposal, it really gets me across the line. So this is a stage and a step in the direction, and it's also a direction that's preferred by the Minister. And they are long term, and the Deputy Mayor mentioned the word amalgamation, but, you know, in my mind, you know, that moving in this direction where we're you know, sharing services, creating entities jointly between other councils, it's in a direction that, you know, I see the benefits where it avoids duplication and it creates efficiencies, and that's where we need to head, and this is one step in that direction. One concern I have is around what's left in these entities. In the councils, once you extract waters, that's something that we can talk about later. But I think, yep, I've got a degree of confidence in terms of moving forward, and look forward to meeting in June to progress it.
Councillor Taylor.
Completely concur with what Councillor Curate just said about the team. I think we've got a very experienced team that has been very helpful in getting us up to speed on this issue, I think. Also, I'd like to make mention of what the Deputy Mayor said earlier. One of the big contentious issues has been the model that we've been presented with, and it's really encouraging to see that we're doing our own in-house version of that, and we will receive that before we make the final decision. So looking forward to seeing what that has to say.
Right, Councillor Baker, then we'll go to Councillor Schuler.
Kia ora. Tautoko a lot of the sentiments that have been shared. I do support the recommendations for the reasons that have been shared. A lot of good questions, and a lot of them still left unanswered, which is a really healthy space to be in at this point in time. And my only ask moving forward for staff and amongst your already hectic schedules is to keep those key community concerns at the forefront of your minds as the foundations of this kaupapa is built, because it would be really awesome for us when we get to the next phase, whether it's the sign-off or something prior, to have really good answers for our community when it comes to the concerns that have been raised. I think that's a really good practice and a really good way to provide assurance that this is the best approach moving forward.
Councillor Schuler.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know, Mayor, how many times I'll say this, but I'm in complete agreement with Councillor Curate. Really, yeah, but I appreciate the sentiments from everyone so far. And I suppose the one thing Councillor Roseboom said, you know, this isn't an absolute commitment, but it is a step down the path to dig deeper and to find out more about exactly what is the best way forward. So fully supportive, and in line with Councillor Baker's comments, I think that's really important. The surveys and the submissions show that the community is quite split on this, and there is a bit of it's a 50-50, and so I think it's really important through the process that we take them with us and make sure that we are happy to share and be open and explain our rationale, because ultimately we do want what's best for the community, and that should be the outcome that comes from this. Thank you.
Right, anyone else like to speak? Councillor Rolleston, and then, Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I think it's been a really good discussion today. I would like to foreshadow that I'd like to add a E3 being the in-house financial model. I know it's talked about in D, but I think that is a document we are intended to receive, and I think we should note that. I would like to take D separately because we already have said that that's the way we're going, but we've heard quite a lot of commentary around whether that is the right thing from people, and there's still a number of questions, as we've talked about, that need to be answered. I don't feel there's a rush, and I know we've got legislation that's requiring us to make decisions, but I'm not feeling that we necessarily have to jump to make those decisions. Even though we might have a bit more established model if we slow down a bit, I'm not unhappy with that because I believe we are well organised. I think the cost model I don't want to make a decision and therefore reapprove a model, a preference without the cost model. So for me, that's a deal breaker. I think that it does worry me that we take waters one step removed from people by having a separate CCO, and that is my biggest issue. And that's understanding the amount of feedback we've had at this annual plan, and as it's my only annual plan and only first time on council, I haven't got any history to say otherwise, but I think it's really important having the people being able to tell us. And just going through that review of our capital projects a couple of weeks ago, I want that to be able to happen, and if 35% of our rates are from waters, I want elected members to have a say on what capital projects are approved for a waters entity. If we're maybe a 50% shareholder, there's others, and that's a CCO, how far removed from elected members actually chewing the fat and making sure we're comfortable with decisions and talking to our people, is that removing those decisions from elected members, which I haven't considered strongly enough yet, and I'd like more time. So I would ask that we do add that 3 and that we take D separately if we may, me mahe.
Oh, sorry, just use that. I was just going to say use the wording in-house developed financial model that is indeed, yeah, just.
I would say note that it is not, I just don't want to prove again.
Just change approved to notes.
No, just take the in-house developed financial model, which is up in D, and just make sure the wording's consistent. So just copy in-house developed financial model, and then just receives, and then just the whole lot. That's all we need. Notes that council will receive.
You might want to correct the spelling of receive.
And you can just take out as per. Yeah.
Can I suggest a small amendment?
Yeah.
Just in terms of the deputy.
Oh, Councillor Schuler.
Well, I think Hemi would.
Yeah, sorry.
If I could just, in terms of the...
Oh, Jen, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
In terms of the Deputy Mayor's concern with D and like a desire to put it separately, I think I'd just ask her perhaps if we change approves to notes that are multi, and it's probably just a bit less directive. We're continuing down the journey.
Yep.
If people are happy with that, mover. Yep. So change approves to notes.
Yep.
Oh, you didn't want to.
Okay. Are you happy with E3?
Well, the staff's already said that's coming, so it's basically just confirming what they've already said.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Cool. So I'm happy to have that added. We'll take D separately. So now, sorry, Councillor Schuler, did you still want to talk? Or you just had a...
No, I can't see E3 yet, that's all.
Okay.
So maybe somebody can email it to me.
E3 says, notes that council will receive an in-house developed financial model.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So-
Councillor Crowther, is that from Councillor Crowther or is
No,
that
that's from Deputy Mayor. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just getting a bit of clarity. I was a bit confused yesterday when my computer came back on.
Cool. All right. So now we'll put the recommendation. Yeah, we've. Oh, sorry, is Hemi? Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, thanks to the team. I thought that was a good session. As I have said, there's been obviously a lot discussed until I joined the table. I am supportive of the direction of travel. I did have some flashbacks when Steve talked around the universal water metering, because I was basically working alongside Steve and understood the angst across the old Mount Burra and the Tauranga around going there. And once we got them in the ground and we saw the results, so the experience of pulling it together in that space. I have sat on a Tauranga Tauranga District Council CCO and a Rotorua one, and I can see the value, but it really does come down to the people. Like any organisation who you put there, the success will come, but the concept of them is supportive. And probably my last comment, which I did come through, is the tangata whenua. This is big when we're talking water. With water, all things are big, but this one particularly, and by all intents, it looks like we're doing that, but really an opportunity to bring them on this journey, whatever that actually looks like. So I just wanted to just put those on record. Thank you.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I support those comments, and yeah, I think it's been very, very helpful, and thank you to staff for, in a way, I just sort of wish we'd had more opportunity for this earlier, because I think it would have been really, really helpful in the consultation process. For me, that's, this is such a huge decision, by far the biggest we will make, and I guess what our people want is probably a key factor for me, as well as obviously ensuring the optimal solution. And I think at the moment, one of the big standouts for me is that although we are articulating the reason for a multi-council CCO, and that may indeed, I'm not arguing the merits of that, I'm just saying it's possible that's best, it's possible it's not, but our numbers show that it's not really that attractive to a lot of people who look at the numbers and go, well, there's some downside risk in that. And so I think we've got to address that issue quite front on and just not be afraid of saying, well, we don't know this, but we do know this, and be as transparent as we can be in this process. Because there will come a point, if we were to say that the scale argument is what we're going with, why don't we just try for the whole of New Zealand? Where do you draw the line? So that issue is something I think that's quite dear to people, is at what point do you feel like you'd lose a bit of control? And so I would, I guess, I heard Jeremy's very valid point about, and Councillor Kurak's comments around how we haven't heard much in the past at this council from the public. And I think that's totally explicable by the fact that we've got a good waters team with good waters infrastructure. But when you look at 2.5 times increase in our waters charges by 2034, based on our own numbers, roughly, give or take a few dollars, that, that's going to wake a few people up. So they won't be kind of going, oh, everything's cool. They'll be going, oh my goodness, we've got two bills, and one's bigger than my rates bill was back in the day, which is now, and the other one is bigger as well. And meanwhile, inflation is a bit different. So I think that's a key driver for why people are concerned about the numbers, which is why I'm concerned about the numbers as well, that I think the numbers are the core of the argument. The FFO numbers, all that sort of stuff is absolutely at the heart of why we would do a CCO. And indeed, we might end up like Western Bay of Plenty District Council, where they feel they're being backed into a corner. Again, they haven't made their decision as far as I know, but I know they kind of look at the way the formulas have been calculated for them, which is different to us, and they feel they don't have much choice. It's not that they want to do it with full of enthusiasm, it's just like, well, we've got no choice because of the way the numbers work and the way the financial contributions work for that council. So with that all in mind, I'd like to propose an amendment that I just circulated, that I put E3 because I'd sent it through a little bit before, but it can be E4 if people wish for it, which is that we also receive, quote, further financial analysis of impacts of CCO options for both the CCO and the remaining council, including NPV, net present value analysis, and any sensitivity analysis. Because what we haven't got, and what some councils have discussed, is the sensitivity analysis. And that's, you know, if we're making a decision based on financial grounds, the normal thing that if it was a board of directors who was running this show, they would be saying, show me the details, show me the sensitivity analysis, and show me the actual numbers in NPV terms, because that's how corporate boards work. Like they would not be just taking it on face value. Now, that's casting no aspersions to anyone at our council, but I'm just saying you have to do due diligence, and I'd like to do that myself, and I'd like to ask for the support of my colleagues to actually do that. If nothing else, if it doesn't change our decision, it's still worth doing that so that we can actually have a bit more evidence to show the public and say, firstly, we did what we were supposed to do, and secondly, this is what we got, and it includes this and it doesn't include that, and we can be fully transparent around it. At the moment, there's a sense with some people that we're just not showing enough information, and to be honest, I don't know what is possible to be achieved, but I would have thought at the bare minimum we would know what the impacts would be on the CCO, what the impacts would be on the council, put those in MPV terms so you can do a comparison, because the timeframes would be different for different issues, and then put the sensitivity analysis as much as we know, and just weight it all and say, here's the finances, and we can weigh that up and we can do whatever we want with it, but at least we'll have done a thorough job on this, and it's so huge that I think we shouldn't be doing anything less. So I'd ask for the support of councillors. Contrary to Councillor Rosabum, I would prefer that the, what was it, D? Would be notes. So I put in my proposed amendment that we just started off either notes that a council workshop will happen, or we could put it further forward and say notes, I can't see the words there right at the moment, but whatever it says, because I think that will send a signal to the public that we have heard them. And when you score the submissions, and I use 3 different recognised statistical analysis methods, you get the consultation results marginally in favour of an in-house, survey results marginally in favour of a Tauranga-only CCO. You know, what it shows is exactly what Councillor Kurak said, that the public are a bit split, there's no definite view, but I think they would want us to be as neutral as we can, while noting, absolutely, we've said what the preferred option is in black and white in the consultation, but at this point, let's just note it and then move forward based on evidence, and then we can all go together.
I just have a clarification from staff. You know, the in-house model will that cover a lot of this?
We can separately present whole of council without waters and some assumptions around transition stranded overhead. So we'll present that on the day as well, just so you can kind of see what's left, which is really that net present value. Take some hits up front in cost of stranded overhead and transition, and then you have benefits in later years, and we can bring that back.
I imagine it could. I'd feel more comfortable if we had a transparency around it, that I don't think it's taking anything away and putting any extra burden. It's just being transparent about what we do want, which is not just read by us, but is read by other people in our community, so that it's something that I've had a number of requests for, and I personally wanted it, obviously, because I've asked for it before, but largely. So even if it's exactly what you're wanting to do, which is fantastic, and I'm not surprised, I still think it's quite nice to note it in there to make it very explicit to everyone.
So does anyone else like to speak to the amendment?
So we are also including Glenn amendment to D, change approves to notes. Separately? Sure, take it separately, but could we add it in the process? Yeah, it gets the Deputy Mayor across the line for D, and it would be unfortunate to put that separately.
Well, then we can take D separately, and if you don't like that, we can vote against it, and notes can come in later if it's not successful. So no further discussion on the amendment. Councillor.
Just clarifying from staff's point of view, it's still
Yeah, we believe so, and I think it's reasonable and fair that the impact on the organisation, the costs, the benefits, and otherwise are part of the decision-making process if a CCO is created and we have stranded overheads, and I think that's a very fair request, something we should provide.
Councillor Schuler, do you have to talk to the amendment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I support that. I do think, and just hearing the CE say exactly what I was going to say. So, you know, that we're looking at one side of the coin. I think it's really important that and the numbers should be there. We should be able to also say by default what the other side of the coin is. And again, I think it's part of, you know, certainly taking the community with us as we go through this process. And, you know, we've said what we're preferring, but we're also, you know, going open book, which I think is good. Thanks, Councillor Carrera.
All right, so I'll now take the amendment. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Roseboom, thank you. That is carried.
Sorry to be a bit persistent on that, but you know, I just prefer that D isn't put separately and we get potentially the Deputy Mayor across the line. So the amendment is to change D approves to notes.
Okay, so we've got a seconder. Yep, Deputy Mayor, thank you. So Councillor Kurak. Yep. Put that now to the council. All those in favour? Okay. Those against? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. So that's changed to notes. So did you get that? Taylor, Roseboom, Schuler and Drysdale against.
Oh, yep. Good. You saw me. Thank you.
Yep. So now we will go back to the substantive. We'll take it all as one, I guess, now. Yep. Okay. So we'll now put that, sorry, just need to put that 4 up. And I'll just wait till can we just get that 4 up into the substantive? Okay, we've got 4 now there. I now put that to the council with that full substantive. All those in favour? Those against? Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. All right, that is done waters. We're actually going to we'll take a longer than normal lunch break. Come back at 3 p.m. We're going to take 11.9 and then 11.10, and then depending on time, the reason we're taking a bit longer is we do have those new reports. So if anyone hasn't read those, if we could just have an opportunity now to go through those that came in last night, and so yeah, depending on timing, we may start discussing those, and then we'll have a pretty good platform probably tomorrow where we'll start bringing all those back and prioritising. So thank you. We'll see you at 3 o'clock.